We're in church, right? Let's tell the truth this morning, okay? The Proverbs 31 woman, she can be a little hard to like. I mean, sometimes I read this passage and I even kind of hate her. She's impressive, but she's a little exhausting, isn't she? I mean, intimidating even. Before the sun comes up, she's already awake. She's feeding the household, running her business, planting vineyards, making clothes, helping the poor, speaking wisdom into somebody who needs it, and somehow she's still smiling like she's gotten a full 8 hours of sleep. How is that possible? Meanwhile, some of us are just trying to remember if we drank our coffee or if we reheated it 3 times over before we got it finished. As you can see, I lost my bulletin and everything else this morning, right? And if we're not careful, instead of being inspired by this woman, we're feeling a little judged and maybe even a little resentful. And what do we tend to do with people that seem just a little too perfect? We distance ourselves from them. We say, that's not realistic. That's not me. I could never be her. And slowly we disconnect from the very scripture that was meant to encourage us. But here's what we need to understand today. God never gave us Proverbs and the Proverbs 31 woman to intimidate us. He gave it to us to inspire us. Because every woman in this room is not called to be the same. But we are called. We are not all given the same gifts. We're not in the same season of our lives. We're not carrying the same responsibilities. But we are all called to use what God has placed in our hands. And here's the truth that we must hold on to today. God never called women or men to perfection. He called us to faithfulness. He called us through His grace. One of the biggest mistakes we make with this passage is reading it like it's a checklist. We treat it like it's a performance review in our job or a to-do list. Did I do this? Did I finish that? Did I accomplish this? Did I meet this milestone? I'm measuring up to everyone else's expectation of me. But this isn't a checklist. It's poetry. It's a portrait. It's a celebration of character. The woman is described as trustworthy, resourceful, compassionate, and wise. But the center of everything about this woman is found in one line. A woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. That's the real foundation. Not how much she produces, not how much she accomplishes, not how much weight she carries. Her relationship with God is what defines her. Because you can be busy and still be really empty inside. You can be productive and still feel disconnected. You can do everything right and still feel like something is missing. This woman's strength is not in her schedule. Her strength is her source of God, from God. Now let's talk about the pressure. This myth of I have to do everything and do it perfectly and be everything to everyone. I never get to say no. I never get to be tired. I don't ever get to fall behind. I don't need help. And if you do or lack any of those things, you feel like you're failing. But real life tells a different story. Real life says that sometimes we're overwhelmed. Sometimes we're exhausted. Sometimes we don't feel like we're seen. Sometimes we give everything we have to everyone around us and nobody notices. Real life says you're carrying these things, but nobody applauds. Maybe you've heard this phrase. It's called invisible labor. Has anybody heard that one? It's the who makes sure that the pantry's filled, that the dish detergent and the laundry detergent's purchased, and the cotton swabs, and that none of those things, and the toilet paper, and they're all purchased and renewed, and they're there waiting for everybody to use them. It's that invisible labor that everybody sort of takes for granted because it's just automatically done. They take it for granted that they're going to go in the cupboard and it's there. There's an emotional weight to this. There's a constant responsibility that falls in this. And if we're not careful, we start believing, if I just do a little more or accomplish one more task, it'll finally be enough. But hear this clearly. You do not become enough by doing more. You are enough because God's grace meets you right where you're at. God's grace fills the gaps where your strength runs out. God's grace carries what you cannot. Now let's step back a second into Luke chapter 10. Martha's doing everything right. She's serving, she's preparing, she's making sure everything's in order. And Mary, she's just sitting there at Jesus' feet, just listening. And Martha gets frustrated with her. She says, Lord, don't you even care? Have you ever prayed that prayer? God, don't you see everything I'm doing? Don't you see how much I'm carrying? But Jesus doesn't rebuke Martha for serving. He corrects her because she's overwhelmed. He says, Martha, Martha, you were worried and distracted by many things. In other words, you're doing a lot, but you're losing yourself in it. And he says, one thing is necessary, and Mary chose it. Presence over pressure. And here's the lesson. You are more than what you accomplish. You are more than what you produce. And you are more than how much you can handle. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is sit down. Now let's look at Acts. Tabitha, or Dorcas, was known for her good works. She made garments for widows. She served her community faithfully. And when she died, people didn't gather to say she was perfect. They said, look what she did for us. They held up the evidence of her love, her impact, her consistency, her faithfulness. That's what moved heaven. Not her perfection, but her faithfulness to what God had called her to do. God is not asking you or I to be flawless. He is calling us to be faithful. Then we see in Luke chapter 8, the woman who supported Jesus' ministry together. They shared the work. They used their resources. They partnered together on purpose. And that matters because many women have been taught that we have to carry everything by ourselves. But that is not God's design for us. We were never meant to hold everything together alone. We were not meant to meet every need alone. And we were not meant to solve every problem alone. God created our community, our church community, our church family, because He knew that at some point or another we would all need support. There is strength in shared responsibility. There is grace in asking for help. And let's redefine this idea that because doing it all has worn too many people out, doing it all is not running yourself into exhaustion. It is not trying to be perfect. It's not being everything to everyone. What doing it well looks like is walking with God daily. It's serving from love, not pressure. It's resting without guilt. And it's trusting that God can finish what we don't have the strength to do. Because everything doesn't have to be done for God's will to be accomplished. When nobody says thank you, when your work goes unnoticed, when you feel worn down and overlooked, God sees you. He sees every sacrifice, every quiet act of love, every tear you didn't explain to everyone or anyone. You are not taken for granted by God. Nothing you do in love is wasted. Today, I invite you to let something go. To let go of the myth of perfection. To let go of the pressure of being everything. To let go of the belief that your worth is tied to your performance. And pick up something better. Pick up grace because you are already loved. Not because you do everything, but because you belong to Him. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to prove anything. You just have to walk faithfully with a perfect God. And when you do that, you're going to discover that you were never called to do everything. You were called to trust in the one who already has.